Welcome back to your Tuesday night Getting Defensive, brought to you by Gridiron Ratings. I am your host, Craig Reith. With me, as always, is Gary, the IDP tipster, and James is off on a special assignment tonight. He'll be reporting back next week, hopefully. As you're tuning in here, most of you on YouTube, some of you on Twitter, but if you have a chance, please make sure you are going over to YouTube to hit like, subscribe if you have not, turn notifications on so you don't miss any of the great content from Gridiron Ratings, and also leave us a comment if you have a question about waiver wire, if you have a question about rest of the season sort of value, one sort of game, sit start. Of course, they go over that stuff on Thursday night more in depth if you have questions about that. It's later in the week, and there's a lot that will happen as we've seen. So please let us know if there's anything we can do to help you out. Gary, how is your night going?
It's going pretty good, man. I'm ready to get this going. And I want to back up what Craig said. Hey, folks, if you're enjoying the program, if we're helping you out, throw us a subscribe, comment, help support us in the simplest way by doing so, and help us grow. And we'll be here to continue to help where we can, when we can. Thank you.
And with that, we're going to jump right into it tonight here. Of course, the big news that we have to jump into, Gary, how are you feeling about PJ Walker? Oh, that's right. I got to get one offensive dig for you there. One per show. We got to get one per show in there.
Yeah. I almost fell for it too. I was like, who?
No. We'll save that for Matt McCarthy. I know does a whole lot of the offensive stuff. So you have questions, find him over on Twitter. Send him any of your offensive questions. We're here for IDP. We'll answer anything you send us in terms of questions. But of course, IDP stuff is our forte. And bye weeks, we go over those every week. Upcoming week 10 here, Chicago, Cincinnati, Houston, and the New York Jets. We did have a few injuries in week 9. There's really one of them that had a lot of bearing for leagues. Two of them that may have bearing in your league if you're in a deeper league. Chauncey Gardner Johnson was carted off with a foot injury. It's completely unclear at the moment what's going to end up being that for him, sort of that cornerback safety hybrid for the Saints. And then Deshaun Elliott, one of the starters at safety for the Baltimore Ravens, is going to be out for the year. He suffered a torn biceps and a torn pec, so that's certainly going to be leaving him out. But the big one, and it may have happened in controversial fashion if you watch the game and the fallout after, Brian Burns had an ankle injury. They're calling it a sprain. Last I looked, the severity of it was not known. He believed to have originally injured it in call it a scuffle or a scrum or a situation with Mac Jones, but he came back to the game and then he left again. It is, again, unclear, but he's probably going to be missing some time here, at least. The time that he would have been on the field sort of split between Uter Gross-Matos and then Morgan Fox, but it's a little bit unclear who's going to sort of be that edge guy taking place or if it'll be a split up. Gary, do you have interest in either one of these guys, at least paying attention to them to see how it's going to play out there?
Well, sure. Yeah. We're definitely going to, keep our eyes on the situation and see, but I'm more interested in seeing how long Burns is out first because, it might be a flash in the pan this weekend for whoever with Fox or I'm not going to hack up the other guy's name, but
right.
Either way, it could be a flash in the pan and we go right back to where we were to begin with. So I'm kind of waiting out this whole Burns thing and, the news, and we'll see how that goes. Hussein Reddick is still going to be there. So he's leading the team in sacks, and I don't suspect that's going to change.
Yeah, and I don't think you're going to have either one of these guys, even if they do get the lion's share of the snaps, just replacing what you're getting from Brian Burns. He's shown himself taking another step after last year, continued to be a force this year for him, sitting at, I think it's like 5.5 or 6.5 sacks for him. He's getting you some decent tackles too. So again, like Gary said, you want to be paying attention to it in case it'd be a long-term thing. But at the moment, they're not just going to be able to plug a play guy that's going to be Brian Burns. That's not how it works, unfortunately.
Yeah, just because they say next man up, not all positions means production by default. If we're talking about a middle linebacker and it's the fourth stringer happens to get in there and his name's not Stannard or Carter, then they can actually produce. But when it comes to a defensive lineman position, that usually is not the case. They can't just step in and get that production by default because it's a lot tougher when you're basically 2 foot away from 300-pound linemen. You've actually got to be good. So, all right, we'll keep an eye on it, see where it goes.
We're going to be touching on a few situations that we'd mentioned in prior weeks as we have a little bit more information each week when these things happen. And this one is going to be throwing another monkey wrench into the whole issue with the linebackers for Denver. It sounds like they are signing, and they may have already today, but it was reported that Avery Williamson was going to be signing with Denver. He's going to be another guy probably playing on the inside for them. Gary, just at first thought, they're probably signing him to get some snaps for him. Do you think that this is more of an indictment of what they've seen out of Kenny Young in 2 short weeks or Baron Browning?
I think that I seen Stannard is on the COVID list.
Do you think it's more of just a depth move at the moment?
Yeah, I do at the moment. I think it's, they're already depleted. They lost Josie Joel. They lost, what was it?
AJ Johnson, yep.
Yeah, Johnson. They lost Johnson and stuff, so they made the trade for Young, and then all of a sudden they have Baring in there, the rookie this year, getting the snaps and getting the job done. I think it's because Stannard went on COVID IR, and they needed somebody. So I can't say for sure that Avery Williamson at this point in his career is better than Young at that inside linebacker position. So I'm not going to be too concerned about it. We'll keep an eye on those snap counts and see. Now, if he steps in this weekend and he gets a portion of Young's snap counts, yeah, there's definitely something there probably. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's just a depth signing.
Of those two guys there already with Kenny Young and Browning, Kenny Young learning the system, of course, coming over from the Rams. He hasn't done a whole lot in the 2 games. His snap count, like 66% it went up. But if you're picking out of those 2 guys, is Browning the guy that I know, Ohio State connection, but is Browning the guy that you want to have out of those 2 anyway?
Yeah, I think long term, especially if we're talking dynasty or something, but even for the redraft for the rest of the year, I mean, I don't think there's any yellow flags that says that anything's going to change. I'm not sure when was it Johnson or I don't think Josie Jewell has a chance to
They're
come
both
back.
out for the year, I do believe.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I think Browning is the guy. They were really high on him this past off season. Unfortunately, he got hurt during camp, and then he turned around and got hurt again during preseason. I think he was having leg or remember ankle issues or what, but I mean, this was why it caught us out of the blue just last week when he all of a sudden we thought it was going to be Kenny Young show, and instead it was Browning got 90% of the snaps. So I definitely think that, and I think they put a nice. I think they took him in the 3rd possibly, so he's got some draft.
Yep,
they've put some draft stock in him. So I think that's the plan. If we remember right, Alexander, he was actually a free agent when we started the season, and then Denver turned around and re-signed him. But they only gave him 1 year, and I don't think they paid him very well either. So I think he's expendable, and I think going forward, as long as Browning doesn't screw up, this job's his.
Yeah, and you would probably know more about Browning from the college aspect of it, but he was one of those guys. He was a high recruit coming into college, he had all the tools that you were sort of looking for. He just never really seemed to put it together at Ohio State in terms of stats, which is interesting. It surprised a lot of people that I talked to anyway that he was taken as high as he did with that seeming lack of production.
Yeah. I think he still did his role. I think he for Ohio State, I think he was a role player. He did his job. It just didn't translate into, what he played with Chase Young, right?
They would have been there at the same time for at least a year or two, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's more of a matter of he was a role player. His job just didn't produce, like a lot of people were expecting. Denver seen something. Of course, I don't trust Elway too much because it's not like he can get a good quarterback. But at the same time, if they believe in Browning, it doesn't really matter what we think. If they're going to put him on the field and he's in that position, we got to take notice.
And to your point, it appears that both Jewell and Johnson are free agents after this year. So long term, certainly Browning may have a role going forward if his audition the rest of this year proves fortuitous for him. So
I remember when he was first drafted, everybody was like, because there was this comment about how he was so happy to go learn off of Von Miller. And then they were also talking, there were reports coming out that he was going to learn the outside linebacker position and the inside linebacker position, but he was mainly going to be learning from like Von Miller. And I was trying to tell people back then, hey, look, who's he going to say that he's going to learn this defense from? Josie Jewell? Is somebody that's not really lit up the place. You're not going to go and say that, I'm going to learn this and I can't wait to work with the third string guy, so, but either way, Browning's in there and we'll see how he does for the rest of the year. So far, so good, right?
Yeah. He's served a role and he's been getting you tackles anyway, which is nice to see. Sticking with linebackers that we've talked about a bit before, we had a bit of a down week for show favorite, and sorry that James isn't here to give us 2 cents as he's a big fan of him as well, Ernest Jones. The good news is he did better than Troy Reeder still. It wasn't by much, but Jones had 3 solos and an assist on a 63% snap share, while Reeder had an 84% snap share, 2 solos and a pass deflection. Sort of flipped from how it was the week before in terms of the snaps. This coming week, they face the 49ers. I know you look at the matchup strength rating and all that, and I don't know if you've heard any scuttlebutt from the coaching staff or anything, Gary, but do you feel like this just might be a switching off who gets the majority of the snaps based on the matchup type of situation for these two while Jones still learns the ropes? Or is it just part of how the game went?
Not at all. Ernest Jones was actually questionable for 2 or 3 days before the contest. He had a stomach virus or a flu bug stomach thing going on, and I really believe that we'll know more after this weekend. But I really believe it was just because the guy hadn't been practicing and he had been sick, and I mean apparently he was healthy enough to play, so they just didn't leave him out there. And Troy Reeder probably had filled in all those days during practice or whatever. So I'm not looking too far into it. I kept watching that question mark. I was hoping it would disappear. I believe it popped up on him on Wednesday or something, and I was hoping he would get a full practice in by Friday, and I would have felt a little bit better. And I was rooting for him. I'm thinking, okay, I'm letting people know this was perfect line or a perfect matchup last week, and ending up it was the game plan was totally different if you caught that game. So it kind of went left in a couple of different ways for me, but at the same time, I'm not too concerned until after this weekend. I think that he did well enough that first game that he was put in there when he gave him the huge amount of snaps the week before, that, it was just in the game script. They just didn't put him out there because he had been sick. It makes sense. I don't think the Rams were planning on losing that contest. All right. I can't remember who beat them.
Tennessee did.
Yeah.
Sunday night.
Yeah. I don't think that they were planning on that happening. So, and then, it was a perfect matchup, but they did go a little bit different route without Derrick Henry in there, with AP being the main guy. So that's why that whole thing went left. Don't drop them, folks. If you can still hang on to them, do that. Now, I am going to warn you. I had them on my waiver wires. Now, as I've mentioned before, there's one thing about my waiver wires. I don't go vanilla on my waiver wires, because there's a lot of times that you'll see people, IDP people, that because a guy is all of a sudden going to become a starter, or he's moved up in the pecking order in the roster or something, they automatically put him on the waiver wire. I will not do that unless they have a good, solid, or strong matchup the following week. So when this happened to Ernest this past weekend, and I also had Troy Reader on there because, of course, Troy Reader is going to be playing more with Young gone. I jerked them both off. Excuse me, that didn't sound right. Pardon me.
I took them off the list.
I took them both off the list of my waiver wire, and our members at Gridiron, I wrote them a note and said, hey, look, this thing went left this past weekend. This coming up matchup next week against the 49ers. If I remember right, they are pretty well rock bottom in allowing points to the inside linebackers. So I just took them off the waiver wire. We'll see what happens this week, and maybe I'll get them back on there. But if you're in a deep league and you can hold on to Ernest Jones, don't let go of him yet. We mentioned this before after his first time that the first contest that he played. This is a rookie. We're going to have up and downs. They're very. It's rare that a rookie would come in and do what he did his first game, like he did it with the interceptions and the sacks and all the combined tackles that he got. That's rare to begin with. Yeah. So it was, it's kind of just a bump in a road. Just give it a moment. It'll right itself. Probably this weekend. I just can't suggest him as a play this weekend when I know there's better waiver wire options out there or better plays, period.
All righty.
That means Troy Reader, too. I wouldn't play them either if you got other options.
This is another linebacker mess. We haven't talked about this one as much, but you also have a vested interest in this next one here, Gary. The New York Jets. So Jared Davis has been back for 2 weeks here. He was at 66% the week prior, and then 73% this most recent week. CJ Mosley, back once he came back 100%. So we know we have him. And then the other sort of linebacker spot, you have a whole bunch of guys: Quincy Williams, Delshon Phillips, Hamson Azarel Dean, and then I think it's Jabari Zuniga. They were all at 35% or below. So you're really not looking at any of those guys right now. Mm-hmm. Jared Davis didn't do a whole lot in this 2 games back, really. He has 3 solos, 2 assists. Do you still have the faith in Jared Davis showing up this season once he gets his feet under him a little bit more?
Well, I kind of had to put my foot down this past weekend. I mean, I made a statement out loud on Twitter because I am a fan of his. But he's on my bench this week, and he's got this week to prove that he deserves to be played again. I don't even care what the matchup is because he actually had a decent matchup this past weekend. I just know, is it Carter and Stannard, which folks have mentioned their names twice. That's the middle inside linebacker for the Panthers, and then the guy that took over for Josie Jewell with Denver. And they weren't even productive by default. They weren't getting 1 or 2 tackles a week, so they weren't even standing up. Do I think that's Jared Davis? No, I don't think so. But the guy, he was on IR. He missed the first part of the season altogether. When I watched the film, it looks like he's just a step behind. But I can't trust him now. I actually had to use him last week because in some deep leagues, I was desperate, so I put him in. and bit me in the butt. And I had him in same lineups as Ernest Jones in a few of them, so it didn't work out real well for me. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sit him this week. And we keep, I guess if you got to drop him, you got to drop him. There shouldn't be too big of a rush to get him right now, but keep an eye on him and let's give the guy a break, see what he does. That's the best I got for you. He's got the opportunity. He's getting the snaps. It's kind of weird that he's not producing more, but it's just one of those things. Right now, he's on my bench.
So anywhere that you had him, I mean, assuming roster space, bench space, all that, you're hanging on to him yet, giving him another week to see what happens.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. If he hits that same range of, because it's coming down to this, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, folks, about the rest of the season and schedules and things going on. But there's too many other options out there. I think that at least I've got my hands on that, I won't need them. So, I am holding on to him right now, mainly because he is a breakout call of mine. I just hope it really works out at some point for him.
Well, and to your point, and we'll get to that with the bye week stuff, as you mentioned, they're just because it seems like there's a lot more of these timeshares and people getting hurt and all that. There are in your standard sort of sized leagues more options than it feels like in prior years. To me, at least, the guys that you can go pick up as a waiver fill-in than there had been prior. When you have these studs performing at such a high level and a number of them, they have a down week or two, you just can't drop them. Where some of these guys that you were relied on in prior years, one of them we didn't talk about before the show at all, Zach Cunningham, he was left for dead. And then Kirksey goes on IR and he comes back and has 100% snap share this past week. Mm-hmm. Is that just going to be a matter of, okay, we got to find somebody? I think they signed Avery Williamson, who had been released. Who knows what they're doing with that linebacker group there. So there are guys that you can find in most leagues, and it will be very interesting to see if this is just how the league is moving forward with this longer schedule, or if this ends up being an anomaly. And of course, we won't know that until well after the fact. But
yeah, it's a double-sided sword. I mean, we've already seen, and we've talked about it in past programs, where, say even 6 years ago, there were 32 inside linebackers that were full-time players. Now there are, 12, 13 to get 90-plus snaps a game. The rest of them are all rotational. They take them in and out. They're bringing more DBs, more nickel packages. And then on top of this 17-game season, they're playing it a little bit closer to the chest. So, and we kept saying, got to be flexible, folks. You got to be flexible. But I'm going to warn you again, just because a guy's coming into some kind of position because of injury or because he's coming back from IR, doesn't mean he's an automatic waiver wire pickup and play. The matchup's got to be right. If not, then you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot and wonder what happened.
Well, and teams also aren't afraid to just, it seems, some teams anyway, but just pull a guy that isn't performing. Like, all right, we're moving on from you. You saw the Baltimore Ravens do that. Yep. Patrick Queen is a guy that they invested high draft pick in, and he had a very nice first season, and they said this isn't working at the moment. It's harder to figure out in Dynasty, I think, because you can't just get rid of him. Do you trade him thinking that, all right, this isn't going to work out? Do you hold on to him because you probably invested a high pick to get him? You can't be as reactionary in Dynasty, but it still affects you in the same way. So
yeah, it's getting tougher. It's getting tougher, and the rest of this season is going to be tough. We'll talk about that in a little bit, though.
Another linebacker spot here. This is the last linebacker pull for the night. Jayon Brown returned his first action since week 4, played a 71% snap share and had 7 solos, which is a nice stat line for how much he played. He played well. He's been a linebacker that's been quality in coverage, and him and Long both performing well. helped them get that upset against the aforementioned Rams. Do we think, and I mean, do you think, I have my opinion on this, but do you think Brown sort of ends up being that second guy in the middle there for him moving forward if he's going to be healthy, which seems to be a big if with him?
Yeah, Evans was out. Evans was out this past week. So let me reflect back on last year, because Long was there last year, which is he's been a darling. He was a waiver wire darling a few weeks ago. You're welcome, Gridiron Ratings members, and myself, because he's on a bunch of my leagues, on a bunch of my rosters. But either way, let's reflect back last year. Now, history repeats itself often, and you kind of got to look at the mindset of what the team is doing. But when it was last year, Long was already sending Evans to the bench last year. Long got a lot of play in a lot of games and played more than Evans. I think in this whole situation, it's going to end up being Long and Brown. Of course, I don't have any inside track on this. I'm just reflecting on the snap counts and what I remember seeing last year doing the start-sit charts. Evans virtually became nothing. He was not usable as an IDP player or an IDP player that you could trust in a lot of weeks. So, and Long was getting a lot of the play. So I got a feeling the way this is going to end up, if Brown stays healthy, and that's a big if anymore, if he stays healthy, we'll probably see the combination of him and Long on the field.
Well, and to your point, Evans was a high pick of theirs, and they already this past offseason declined his fifth-year option. They had seen enough that they didn't apparently think it was worthy to just have him on that other team when they were given that option, which does say something to their mindset, to your point, about the guy. Brown is back. They've seen what he's been able to do, and we know the NFL is moving to much more pass-heavy in general, where you need those linebackers if they're going to be on the field to cover, and Brown is a lot better than Evans in coverage. So
definitely,
I tend to think that Brown, like you said, if he's healthy, is going to be the second guy there too. Long got banged up. He was apparently fine after the game, but something to keep an eye on too, to see if he's going to be healthy this coming week.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you got to take a leap of faith. Say Evans comes back this week. Off the top of my head, do you know who Tennessee plays? I might be able to remember.
They play New Orleans, which I don't think is a great matchup. I'm
trying. They fed. Of course, Atlanta has nobody on the defensive line. I don't think it's a super great matchup. So if you have a better option, you might want to go with it, because it might be a little bit risky this week with Long. It could be if Evans is back. It's just hard to tell with Brown. It's like I was being asked about Brown. Well, before Evans was out, I was telling people, no, I wouldn't play Brown because we just don't know. And the only thing we do know is Long has been producing. So, it's one of those kind of double-edged swords. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Do you play Long? Do you play Brown? Well, it depends on how deep your league is. If you have a safer option, try to avoid them. But if you're starting 4 linebackers and you've been depending on Long this whole time, you just kind of got to ride it out. See what happens.
All right. Our last sort of player note for the week here, and I think he was either in the waiver article that I do. I know he was in there, and I don't recall if we mentioned him specifically last week on this show. I think that we did, but you can always go back and check out on YouTube. You can check out our past episodes. So check them out.
I was actually on Tuesdays. I'm on Tuesdays and Thursdays, folks. We have mentioned his name periodically over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to do it again, because we're just going to make sure that you all know that if this dude's sitting on your waiver wire, he should not be.
Yeah, he was I think like a top 20 interior lineman, defensive
13th.
Tackle type guy last year.
13th at the end of the season.
It's David Onyemata for the New Orleans Saints. He had been a 44% week 8 snap share, got up to 63%, while Tano Faison, I think that's correct. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Every time that comes
Okay.
up, I'm getting close. But he went from 50% down to 28%. He'd sort of been the guy there. And it was a good matchup last week with going against the Falcons. I'm not quite sure what the Titans face in terms of matchup rating. Gary, you'd know more about that.
He made my waiver wire. It is I'll tell you here real quick. Strong. It's strong. Tennessee, I believe, is within that top 10, allowing points to the inside defensive lineman. So it should be another one. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see. I'm not going to say his name because I'm just going to mess it up. But I wouldn't necessarily think that he's going to jump much higher, if any higher, in snap counts because New Orleans they rotate. So K-Pass will still get his. Tuttle's in there, and I think they have another rookie that they might have, which is technically a defensive end, but I think that they just rotate these guys in and out.
Peyton Turner? Is that
Yeah. So I forgot. I couldn't remember. I was thinking of a Granderson or Granderson or something too.
Carl Granderson had been getting snaps. I don't know if he got hurt or what, but he didn't get any last week.
Okay. So again, he's, being a defensive tackle, he's probably not going to see more than 70% of the snaps. He's not that type of player yet. He's not a Grady Jarrett or a Kenny Clark or Jeffrey Simmons or anything like that. Not yet. So I wouldn't plan on that in the past. They always rotate those inside guys, give them breaks, keep them fresh. But he definitely, is a guy that should not be sitting on a waiver wire. Is he an every week play? Well, I don't know. We got to see what he can do because he just got done getting suspended for doing performance enhancing drugs. So if he's off of those, how good will he be? I have no idea. But he's got some matchups coming up, and if you have some kind of resource that you can figure out which one's a good matchup, which is bad, like our start sit charts on Gridiron Ratings, the guy's going to be real useful for the rest of this season, and including this weekend. So go get him off the waiver wire.
Speaking of the rolling waivers, you can find those over at gridironratings.com. Become a member, and you can find everything that Gary has going on in his office with the different sit-start charts. You can find the rolling waivers, all that good stuff to help you get your league. And I did want to bring him up, just popped into my head here. Gary, I apologize, he wasn't on the list, but same team, Marcus Davenport had a great week, and his snap counts have been going up. He had that great week 1. He got hurt. He was slowly, snap count wise, working his way back. He went from, in week 7, he had a 1 assist tackle. That was it. I think he had 3 solos and like a tackle for a loss in week 8. And then he had, 3 solos, 3 assists, a sack, and like a tackle for a loss or something. Again, matchup wise, it was nice against Atlanta. But is he a guy that you have interest in here too? Keeping an eye on?
No.
No?
I was on Davenport's. From the time that he was drafted, I kept an eye on him. I really thought, the Saints sold the house to get him in that draft. They gave up a bunch to Miami, I believe.
It was Green Bay. They traded a future first and their first that year to move up into the teens to get him.
All right. And the guy's been hurt a lot over his career so far. But that's not the point, is that he's only showed in spurts, and he hasn't showed very well. So, I wasn't running out to get him on. I didn't add him to my waiver wire this week. I just don't. He's definitely one of those guys I want to see it happen for 3 weeks in a row. I've got a golden thumb rule usually, especially at the beginning of the season, folks. And that's it. I want to see somebody do something for 3 weeks in a row with some good snaps, good production, at least match the snaps versus the matchup. And he just doesn't fit the bill yet. He's not there. I would like to think, he's a late bloomer. Maybe he's finally healthy. but I'm not suggesting them, especially this weekend. I want to see more.
Fair enough. Just popped into my head as the same team.
No. I actually looked at them. I looked into them. I just couldn't put them on that waiver wire.
all right.
I was like, yeah.
So, as we mentioned, thinking ahead, this is going to be a big thing. You know, we've talked about this, and I think James had mentioned that in one of his topics when he'd been here. But bye weeks are going to be coming a little bit harder right before your playoff push, which is always great to see. Week 13 here, we got the Panthers, Browns, Packers, and Titans. So, you know, teams doing well. And then the Colts, the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Eagles in week 14. Now, I know, you know, there's that extra week of games, but your playoffs probably, you know, maybe pushed back a week or something, depending on your league and how you guys dealt with that. But these are late bye weeks. So, Gary, are you looking at matchups like that far in advance in terms of, all right, you know, I have these guys that are generally my starters. I'm going to be out X, Y, and Z. And are you trying to look for matchups coming up for guys that might be on the waiver wire to stash if you have roster size, or how are you preparing for this?
Well, I've actually been cheating for the last week or two. I've already put out rest of the season linebackers and the rest of the season safeties. So I'm in the process of working on the interior defensive linemen and the edge rushers. So I'm hoping to find that before week 13 and 14, because you would think even if most leagues with 17 weeks for one, hopefully is not having your championship game in 17, just like it used to be. You didn't really want to have that in 16 because so many teams are just going to sit their starters for various reasons. Either they've made the playoffs or they're checking out their third, fourth stringers for next year if they're not in the playoffs. There's a lot of things that can happen in 17, and usually it's pretty rough. So you got to figure 13 and 14 are going to be really key for a lot of leagues when it comes to these playoffs. And there's a total of 8 teams in those 2 weeks. We're going to be missing a lot of good players. I mean, you're going to be losing Leonard. You're losing, I'm just, you can look at, like you said, it's the Panthers, Packers, Browns, and Titans in 13, Eagles, Colts, Dolphins, and Patriots. Of course, Patriots ain't losing too much, maybe Duger. But still, you're going to have to think ahead because these matchups are going to matter. And it's going to be tough to pick somebody off the waiver wire and use them on a spot that late in the season. It's like right now, we don't go vanilla here, folks. We do talk shallow leagues, but we don't go vanilla. We're looking deeper. We like the deeper leagues. We like playing in the deeper leagues. And you've got to think ahead. I'm going to spend week 11 and 12. And if I'm pulling up somebody off the waiver wire, I'm looking ahead and trying to figure out, or looking at my rest of the season ratings and rankings. And I'm going to try to find somebody that's going to be the best serviceable, even if it's just a solid guy all the way through, not strong, because that's what we'll run into. You'll have a defensive tackle, say in week 11, who'll have a strong one. Week 13, he'll have a weak matchup. And then 13, he'll come back and he'll have a solid. I don't care. I'm just going to look for that medium guy to just kind of carry me out the season, if at all possible, if I'm working off the waiver wire. I hate to say, go sign up for Gridiron Ratings right now, and I'll help you out for the rest of the year. But that's what I'll do. Find you a resource. Find you somebody like, Kraig, anybody. Ask somebody to look ahead for you. Do your own research if you need to. But it's not going to be just cut and dry this year in the playoffs for IDP people. It's going to be people running around. If you're lucky, you're in a league where about half the guys quit playing with the waiver wire about then because they're not going to be in the playoffs. So maybe there will be a little bit of meat on there for you. But I kind of doubt it, and I think it's going to be real interesting on the way out the door to the playoffs. I think it's the person that thinks ahead and can figure out ahead what those matchups will be that'll actually make the big championship games in these leagues.
Yeah, and even if you're going to be assured of a playoff spot by then, we've all seen it before. Like, and I'm not saying to throw games or anything like that. Like some people say teams do in the NBA or something, perhaps for seeding. But being a team that gets a bye or something like that can matter for you in your fantasy playoffs. And these last two games, right before you get into those playoffs, there's still going to be big implications for your team, whether or not there are for some of these NFL teams. And the more of an edge that you can get, like Gary's talking about, the better you're going to be to position yourself and know who you want to be keeping and who maybe it's all right to let go of in your redraft leagues.
Oh, you hit it the nail on the head there. I mean, I didn't even think about that as I was talking, but if you can get a bye and you can think ahead on the next on week 14, say it starts 13 or whatever, if you can take the time and find the resources and do your homework, you could that bye week would be gold.
All right. So, Gary, I know we're running late here. We started a little bit late, but without going into too many secrets here, do you have a name or two you want to drop for the listeners, for guys to potentially look out for in leagues?
I just might have. Unfortunately, when I found out that James was going to be on special assignment a few hours ago, James, we look forward to you coming back next week too, buddy. I dove in a little bit here. I'm going to start off with Alex Anzalone. Believe it or not. Okay, so this is a guy that a lot of you might know that I've been on and everything. I started looking at him a while back. Did you know that right now he has only had one matchup in his favor for his position and what is points allowed this entire season? The rest of them have all been down. Now, we don't notice that because Reeves may be and stuff, so he's in there playing 50% of the snaps or 60% of the snaps, and he's still producing. Now, hey, whatever. But I'm telling you, if you're needing a waiver wire pickup this week, I'm playing him. I know I need him. I think that he has a combined tackle ceiling of around 8, maybe 9. Maybe get a little bit extra play, like a pass defended or something out of this contest versus the Steelers, which are actually like in the top 5 in allowing points to the inside linebacker position. You might drop him right after that, but you only need him for a week. So if you're looking for a waiver wire, he's on my list, and he does have a strong matchup. There are too many shares of Damian Wilson out there too, folks. He should have been picked up last week after the Jags bye. He's wearing the green dot and playing like nearly every down, so he's going to be producing. IDP was still on a lot of, at least on ESPN. He's on the waiver wire on a lot of leagues. Okay, let's go with the tandem safeties for New York. I think these guys are both rookies. I know Davis is, but Michael Carter, is he the third? Is he a rookie? Do you know?
He is a rookie. Yep. They drafted both Michael Carters as rookies this year just to confuse everybody.
Right. Now we know Marcus May he's out for the rest of the season. So go get either one of these guys. Should do fine against New England this weekend. New England just hand feeds points to the safeties. So I think both of them are good plays. I'm going to take Davis, and believe it or not, around the 10 combined. And I think he's got an extra play in him. When I say extra play, folks, I mean the passes defended, interception, fumble recovery, something along those lines. Even a tackle for a loss for safety is not out of the question. And then Carter, I got him knocked down a little bit lower. He might be more of a 7 combined ceiling. But I think that he has a possibility that he might be able to get a couple of extra plays out of him, passes defended or such. Then I'm going to go on down. Miami's Ogba, defensive end. I think that's how you pronounce it, Ogba.
Yep.
Okay, so he's not been – he was really hot at the end of last season. Now, this season, he's not been as hot, but he is coming off a really good game with Houston. And he's got a strong matchup against Baltimore this weekend. I can imagine around the 4 combined, one sack, which will probably bring you a tackle for loss too. Can't guarantee the sack, but I bet he gets in the backfield at least for a tackle for a loss. And then I'll go with Grady Jarrett. I've been telling you for the last 2 weeks that he was going to be solid play, and he is again this week against Dallas. And he's probably got that, what he's been averaging, around 4 combined. And we might see him with a tackle for loss. He might get Zeke in the backfield there.
All right. Well, there's sort of one for you guys across the board at the different positions for you. And I like to throw something weird in here each week for you guys, usually in a deeper league type of poll, because that's the weird stuff that I get into. But if you're looking for a cornerback, a guy that I like is Brandon Faison. He is a cornerback for the Las Vegas Chargers here. The
Las Vegas Chargers?
Raiders.
It's late, folks. It's late. He's got a newborn. He was all yawning. I'm surprised. So, yeah, go right ahead, Kraig.
Yeah, week 6, he saw his first playing time as a 73% snap share. Followed up the next 2 weeks that they played with 100% each of those. They did have their bye in there. But over those 3 games, he has 14 solos, 5 assists, 5 pass deflections, and an interception. And they're playing the Chiefs this week. And the Chiefs like to give up points to cornerbacks, and they don't have anyone besides Casey Hayward right now. The Chiefs, Raiders are just a mess in general, but on their defense, especially in that defensive backfield. So as a guy that's probably unowned in virtually every league that you're in, if you're looking for a cornerback streamer, he's my cornerback of the week.
Yeah. Hopefully most of everybody is in that position where they are streaming cornerbacks, folks. If you're spending there's only so many Humphreys out there. So if you've got a designated cornerback position that you got to fill, it should be the last thing that you're feeling, in my opinion, when you think about ADP and what it takes to get somebody like Humphreys. So streaming has worked for me all this year. I am not a big cornerback guy, so I haven't actually been playing in any leagues for a few years that actually had designated cornerbacks in the lineup. But this year with the IDP incentive, which is my flagship league for Gridiron Ratings, I've been streaming all year, and I've been doing just fine. I'm getting guys that are only getting 5 or 6 tackles via the matchups. But, the big thing is don't take the big fat 0. So as long as you're streaming the right leg and the right connection, or taking Kraig's advice, don't put any draft stock into those guys. If somebody wants to trade you something shiny for a cornerback, I'd take it. It's got to be one of the most streamable positions out there. And the waiver wire is always full of them. That never changes.
Yeah, if you want to put the time and the effort into it, or find someone else out there that is, there are usually several nice options that you can just pick up off the waiver wire. There's no reason to be investing your time and effort into a Marlon Humphrey or someone like that you're going to have to draft a lot higher than you probably want to if you go get that guy. And that's what we have for you here tonight on the Tuesday episode of Gridiron Ratings. Remember, Thursday back, and that is at 9 p.m. Eastern with Gary, host JJ Wenner and Dynasty Trip, and sometimes a guest. We'll see if someone else stops in this week, but going over any sort of late breaking news and sit-start matchup advice. So if you have any questions, please, you can find Gary there at the IDP Tipster. You can go on to the YouTube while you're there putting in comments or questions. You can hit that like button. That'd be great. And throw a comment even after the fact. We'll follow up, be checking for those. If you have anything, you can find us on Twitter. Gary, anything you want to add before we?
Yeah, I'm laughing at myself because I got your Brandon whatever for the Rams or for the Raiders.
Yeah.
I actually have him on my list this week. Tyson
That's
Campbell
good.
for the Jags. And let's see. Here's one for you. Cameron Dantier, Minnesota.
Cameron Dantzler, yep.
Yeah. There's some streamable ones for you, folks. It's just funny. I was like, man, that name sounds familiar because I don't know these cornerbacks. And you said it, so I was like, huh, there it is. Well, folks, you all have a great couple of days. I'll see you Thursday. Thanks, Kraig. Everything's down. Please go like, comment, subscribe, whatever. It helps support us so that we'll continue to keep coming back and getting in your face with some IDP and getting defensive. Hey, get defensive in a comment. I don't care. We'll talk to you about it.
Yeah, if you think that we're wrong and we're full of it, hey, let us know. Let us know what you think. Any questions, comments, concerns, inquiries, or like Gary said, if you want to get defensive with him, he's always up for a challenge. So you know where to find him.
Yep.
But in the meantime, have a great night, everybody.
Bye.